The unseen shadows of stillness. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, mirror-like lake at dusk. The surface is so still it reflects the sky perfectly, the first stars, the fading blush of sunset, the faintest shimmer of moonlight. You've been told that if you sit here long enough, gazing into these waters, you'll find clarity, peace, perhaps even enlightenment. So you sit, you breathe, you wait, and then, one night, you notice something unsettling. The longer you stare, the more the reflections warp. Shapes move beneath the surface that shouldn't be there. The sky's serene image fractures, and for a fleeting moment, you catch a glimpse of something darker, older, rising from the depths. This is the untold story of meditation, not just as a path to light, but as a doorway to shadows we rarely acknowledge. For centuries, meditation has been painted in strokes of gold, a universal remedy for stress, a ladder to higher consciousness, a sacred tool whispered about in monasteries and modern therapy offices alike. And it is all these things. But like any powerful practice, it has an edge, a shadow side rarely spoken of in mainstream circles. What happens when the mind, stripped of its distractions, turns inward and confronts what it has spent a lifetime avoiding? What ancient fears, buried traumas, or even existential terrors might surface when the chatter of daily life falls silent? This is the paradox. The same practice that can dissolve anxiety may also unleash it. The same silence that brings peace can, for some, become a cavern echoing with forgotten ghosts. Consider the metaphor of a sealed attic in an old house. Meditation unlocks that attic door. Most of the time, you'll find dusty treasures, old joys, latent creativity, a deeper sense of connection. But sometimes, you'll open it to find storms waiting. Modern spiritual culture often skims over this truth, preferring to frame meditation as a one-way ticket to bliss. Yet ancient traditions knew better. Tibetan Buddhists speak of nyams, disturbing visions or psychological upheavals that arise during deep practice. Kundalini awakenings, often glamorized in spiritual circles, can sometimes lead to months of disorientation or even psychosis if not guided carefully. Even the famed dark night of the soul, described by mystics like St. John of the Cross, is a testament to the fact that the path inward isn't always gentle. It can feel less like floating in a sunlit ocean and more like free-falling through a starless void. Why does this happen? Because meditation isn't just about relaxation, it's alchemy. It dissolves the ego's defenses, the stories we tell ourselves to stay sane. Strip those away, and you're left face to face with the raw, unfiltered self. For some, this might mean confronting childhood wounds or repressed grief. For others, it could trigger existential dread, the crushing weight of realizing one's smallness in an infinite universe. And for a rare few, it might even blur the line between spiritual awakening and psychological crisis. This isn't to fear meditation, but to respect it, as one respects fire, or the ocean, or any force powerful enough to transform. There's a reason this shadow side is so often ignored. We live in a culture addicted to quick fixes and positivity mantras. The idea that a practice marketed for stress relief could unearth deeper turmoil is inconvenient, even threatening. But by turning away from these truths, we do seekers a disservice. Imagine handing someone a map to a sacred mountain but omitting the cliffs, the sudden storms, the places where the trail vanishes. That isn't guidance, it's negligence. So let's walk this path together, eyes open. Let's explore what happens when the mind's locked doors swing wide, when the light of awareness illuminates not just the serene, but the shattered. This isn't a warning against meditation, it's an invitation to practice with wisdom, to honor its power fully. Because true awakening isn't just about reaching for the light. It's about learning to navigate the dark. The hidden architecture of inner turmoil. There is a quiet revolution happening in the stillness. Every time someone closes their eyes to meditate, they step onto an ancient battleground, one where the war is not fought with swords, but with silence. The breath becomes a compass, the mind both map and territory. But what happens when the territory reveals itself to be vaster, stranger, and more treacherous than we were led to believe? The dark side of meditation is not some aberration, It is the natural shadow cast by the light of awareness, and to understand it, we must first explore the core themes that define its landscape. The illusion of control. Meditation is often sold as a tool for mastery, over stress, over thoughts, over the self. But the deeper truth is that true meditation dissolves the illusion of control rather than reinforcing it. When we sit in silence, we are not the calm CEO of our mind, directing traffic from a polished office. We are more like a wanderer in a dense forest, where thoughts and emotions emerge like sudden weather, unpredictable, wild, and indifferent to our preferences. This loss of perceived control can trigger primal panic. The mind, accustomed to its role as narrator, rebels when stripped of its script. For some, this manifests as intrusive thoughts, violent, taboo, or nonsensical images that arise unbidden. These are not signs of failure, but proof that the mind, when undisturbed, begins to reveal its hidden machinery. The echo chamber of the unconscious. Imagine dropping a stone into a well and waiting to hear the splash. Now imagine that the well is bottomless, and the splash never comes. This is the unsettling revelation many encounter in deep meditation, the realization that the self is not a solid thing, but an endless echo. Memories we've buried, traumas we've numbed, even past life fragments, if you entertain such concepts, all can surge upward when the waters of the mind are stilled. Psychologists call this psychological decompensation. Mystics might term it the purging of samskaras. Either way, the result is the same. The meditator becomes a witness to their own unraveling. This is why seasoned practitioners often emphasize the need for grounding, because to dive without an anchor is to risk dissolution. The seduction of spiritual bypassing. Here lies one of the most insidious traps, the use of meditation to escape rather than confront. Spiritual bypassing is the act of using transcendence to avoid dealing with unresolved pain. It's the person who glows with artificial serenity, insisting they've released all negativity, while their unprocessed rage leaks out in passive aggression or emotional withdrawal. The dark side of meditation thrives in this avoidance. True practice should illuminate our shadows, not gaslight them into submission. When a person uses mantras to suppress grief or mindfulness to detach from healthy anger, they are not walking the path, they are digging a trench around it. The loneliness of the seer. Awakening carries a peculiar isolation. As the meditator begins to see through societal constructs, the race for status, the addiction to distraction, they often find themselves estranged from the very world they once navigated effortlessly. Relationships strain when one partner starts questioning shared assumptions. The workplace feels absurd when you no longer fear the disapproval of superiors. This is the dark night of the soul in its modern guise, not some medieval mystic's ordeal, but the very real alienation of realizing you've outgrown systems you once depended on. The irony? This loneliness is often misinterpreted as a failure of practice, when in truth, it is a sign of its success. The caterpillar, mid-metamorphosis, would surely feel the same. The mirage of the quick fix. Modern wellness culture has turned meditation into a commodity, another item on the checklist of self-optimization, sandwiched between green juice and a HIIT workout. But authentic meditation does not yield to productivity logic. It is not a mental fitness app. The dark side emerges when seekers approach it with the same impatience they bring to a fad diet, only to discover that stillness amplifies rather than silences their inner chaos. This is the backlash, the abandoned practice, the disillusionment with spirituality, the cynical return to distraction. The truth is that meditation is not a tool for fixing the self, but for realizing the self cannot be fixed, only witnessed, only known. The body's rebellion. We forget that the mind is not separate from the flesh. When meditation unlocks stored trauma, the body often speaks first, through sudden tremors, waves of heat or cold, or even pain that defies medical explanation. Kundalini awakenings, when mishandled, can send seekers to the ER with symptoms mimicking heart attacks. This is not mysticism, it is biophysics. The nervous system, when forced to process decades of suppressed stress, reacts like a coiled spring suddenly released. The dark side of meditation is, in part, the body's invoice for all the times we ignored its whispers. These themes are not warnings, but signposts. They remind us that meditation is not a tame pet, but a wild animal, beautiful, powerful, and deserving of respect. To pretend otherwise is to infantilize the practice and those who undertake it. The path forward is not to fear the shadows, but to learn their language. The mythic underworld of meditation. There is an old story, whispered in the secretive corners of esoteric traditions, about a king who built a labyrinth so vast and intricate that none who entered could find their way out. At its center, he placed a mirror. When seekers finally reached it after days of wandering, exhausted and desperate, they did not find treasure or revelation, only their own hollow-eyed reflections staring back. This is the unspoken journey of deep meditation. The labyrinth is the mind, the mirror is the self, and the terror lies not in being lost, but in being found. The descent of Inanna. Consider the ancient Sumerian myth of Inanna, the goddess who willingly descended into the underworld. At each of the 7 gates, she was stripped of a sacred adornment, her crown, her jewels, her robes, until she stood naked and kneeling before her dark sister, Ereshkigal. The parallels to meditation are uncanny. Each time we sit in stillness, we pass through invisible gates where the ego is dismantled piece by piece. The crown of achievement, the jewels of identity, the robes of social validation, all are left behind in that descent. What modern practitioners call the dark night of the soul, the Sumerians framed as divine initiation. The key insight? Inanna only gained true wisdom after her execution in the underworld and subsequent resurrection. The darkest moments in meditation are not obstacles, but initiatory gates. The alchemist's nigredo. In medieval alchemy, the first stage of transformation was called the nigredo, the blackening. The alchemist would take base matter and subject it to decay, watching as it putrefied into a foul black mass. Only through this dissolution could the subsequent stages of purification begin. Psychological parallels abound. The meditator who confronts sudden depression, irrational rage, or existential dread is experiencing spiritual nigredo. This is why so many abandon practice at this stage, mistaking the alchemical process for failure. They flee the blackening, not realizing it is the prerequisite for gold. The shaman's dismemberment. Across indigenous traditions, the shaman's initiation follows a harrowing pattern. They are ritually torn apart, bones separated, organs removed, by spirits or ancestors, only to be reassembled with greater wisdom. Contemporary accounts of intense meditation retreats often mirror this symbolism. Practitioners report sensations of bodily dissolution, encounters with inner entities, or visions of being flayed alive. These are not hallucinations to be pathologized, but the psyche's way of enacting sacred dismemberment. The modern world has forgotten that healing sometimes looks like annihilation first. The Fisher King's wound. Arthurian legends tell of the Fisher King, guardian of the Holy Grail, who suffers a grievous wound that will not heal. His kingdom withers in sympathy, becoming a barren wasteland. Only when a fool, unburdened by cleverness, asks the right question, whom does the Grail serve? Does the king begin to mend? The dark side of meditation presents us with our own version of this wound. Many practitioners carry an unspoken belief that their pain, anxiety, addiction, chronic illness should have been cured by now through spiritual practice. When it persists, they interpret it as failure rather than the very crucible of their transformation. The Fisher King's lesson? Some wounds are not meant to heal in the way we expect. They are the keepers of our grail. The mirror in the dark. Zen masters speak of a practice called sitting with the corpse, meditating in graveyards to confront mortality's visceral truth. But there exists a more subtle corpse we must face, the death of who we thought we were. In the void of deep meditation, when all concepts fall away, what remains is not some enlightened sage, but a raw, nameless presence. This is the mirror at the labyrinth center. Its revelation is brutal in its simplicity. You are not your achievements, not your trauma, not even your awareness. You are the space in which all these arise and pass away. For those unprepared, this realization. The cosmic joke. Finally, there is the moment every long-term meditator encounters, the cosmic punchline. After years of striving for enlightenment, chasing states of bliss, or attempting to perfect their practice, they suddenly see the trap. Meditation was never about achieving some exalted condition. It was always just this: the breath, the present, the ordinary miracle of being. The dark night ends not with a bang, but with a sigh of laughter at one's own earnestness. This is perhaps the most merciless shadow of all, the realization that the seeker is the obstacle, and the path was only ever here, now, in the unremarkable and the unfinished. These narratives are not mere metaphors, they are the living architecture of the inner world. They remind us that the darkness encountered in meditation is not deviation, but destiny, the kind of destiny that rewrites itself each time we have the courage to sit in the fire. Consider the executive who begins meditating to reduce stress, only to find herself suddenly unable to tolerate the moral compromises of corporate life. The practice hasn't failed her, it has succeeded in revealing what was always there. Or the parent who, through mindfulness, becomes acutely aware of how often they speak to their children in tones inherited from their own upbringing. This is the gift and the burden of awakening: we see more, and thus bear more responsibility for what we see. Navigating the shadowlands. The true test of any spiritual insight comes not in the rarefied air of meditation cushions, but in the messy reality of daily life. What good is wisdom if it cannot walk through traffic jams, office politics, or family arguments unscathed? The dark side of meditation presents us with a paradox. The very practice meant to bring peace can initially make life feel more difficult. This is not a flaw, but a feature, the sign of authentic transformation working its way through the layers of our being. The body often becomes the battleground where these revelations play out. A long-time practitioner may develop sudden insomnia as their nervous system recalibrates. Another might experience waves of grief or anger with no apparent trigger, the psyche's way of finally processing what was buried during years of survival mode. These are not signs to panic over, but neither should they be spiritualized into submission. The middle path lies in practical integration. Grounding becomes essential during these phases. Where the mind wants to float into abstraction or retreat into dissociation, the body can serve as an anchor. Simple practices take on new importance: walking barefoot on grass, swimming in cold water, kneading bread dough. These are not distractions from the spiritual path, but its continuation, ways of remembering that enlightenment must grow roots in the physical world. Relationships inevitably shift. The meditator who once laughed at their partner's jokes out of habit may find themselves unable to fake amusement. Colleagues' petty power plays become intolerable not because of judgment, but from a visceral recognition of life's brevity. This is where many falter, mistaking the discomfort of growth for a mistake in the practice itself. Yet these tensions contain invaluable guidance, showing us where we've been out of alignment with our deeper truth. Perhaps most challenging is the confrontation with time. The still mind begins to perceive how much of life is spent rehearsing the past or anticipating the future. What remains is the shocking spaciousness of the present, beautiful in theory, but terrifying in its demand that we actually inhabit our lives rather than just pass through them. Productivity suffers. Old motivations crumble. The ego screams that this is regression, when in fact it's the beginning of real freedom. Financial realities often come under scrutiny. The same awareness that sees through societal illusions may also reveal uncomfortable truths about one's livelihood. A marketing professional might realize they are paid to manipulate desires. A lawyer could awaken to how the system they serve prioritizes procedure over justice. These crises of conscience are not obstacles to avoid, but initiations into integrity. The body's wisdom reasserts itself in surprising ways. Food that once brought comfort may now cause sluggishness. The need for movement changes, yoga replacing intense workouts, or vice versa. Sleep patterns shift as the nervous system recalibrates. These are not problems to solve, but messages to heed. The dark night teaches us to listen beneath language, to the primal intelligence that has been signaling all along. Social media becomes nearly unbearable to the awakening mind, not from superiority, but from heightened sensitivity to the desperation beneath the curated images. The compulsion to share profound experiences arises, only to be met with polite incomprehension from friends. This loneliness is initiation's price and its gift. In the space it creates, we discover who we are when no one is watching. The most practical tool turns out to be the simplest: patience. Not the passive waiting of spiritual bypassing, but the active patience of a gardener who knows growth cannot be rushed. Dark nights end, not when we've figured them out, but when we've learned what they came to teach. And always, the lesson is the same. Reality is here, now, in this breath, this step, this ordinary miracle of being alive. The alchemy of darkness. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the maps run out. You stand at the edge of what language can describe, where the well-worn spiritual platitudes, "just let go, be the witness, everything is light," crumble like ash in your hands. This is not failure, but the threshold. The dark side of meditation was never your enemy, though it may have felt like one. It was the merciless friend, the one who loved you enough to strip away everything you thought you were, so you could finally meet what remains. The initiation you didn't know you signed up for. Meditation begins as a tool, becomes a practice, and, if you let it, ends as an initiation. Like the shaman thrown into the abyss or the alchemist watching their prized elements blacken and rot, you too have been in the fire. The anxiety that surged during your sits, the existential dread that kept you awake at night, the moments when you questioned your very sanity, these were not signs that you were doing it wrong. They were proof you were doing it right. True transformation does not come from floating in perpetual bliss, but from the courage to face what arises when all your escapes fall away. The myth of the enlightened future self. Here is the secret no one tells beginners. Awakening is not about becoming some future version of yourself who has it all figured out. It is about realizing there is no figured out to be had. The enlightened person is not the one who has transcended darkness, but the one who knows how to sit with it, not as a temporary guest, but as a lifelong companion. Your depression, your fear, your rage, these are not obstacles to your path. They are the path. When the Zen master says, "The obstacle is the path," this is what they mean. The darkness is not blocking your way home, it is the way home. The invitation to live the questions. Rilke wrote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves." This is the only sane response to the dark night. You will not solve the existential terror that sometimes grips you at 3 a.m. You will not fix the part of you that still trembles with ancient fears. But you can learn to hold these experiences differently, not as mistakes to be corrected, but as sacred mysteries to be lived. The question, "Why is this happening?" will not always have an answer. But the deeper question, "Can I be with this?" changes everything. The return to wonder. Somewhere along the way, between the intensity of your seeking and the exhaustion of your struggles, you forgot this was never supposed to be serious. Enlightenment is not a solemn achievement, but a return to childlike wonder. The cosmic joke is that after all your efforts to transcend the human condition, the goal was always to become more human, more vulnerable, more imperfect, more breathtakingly alive in your fragility. The dark nights, the existential crises, the moments of feeling utterly undone, they were not detours. They were the dismantling of the seeker so the human could finally emerge. The call to radical embodiment. Now comes the real work, not transcending the body, but descending into it with fierce devotion. After all those hours watching your breath, you are being asked to become it, to stop observing life from a safe distance and to plunge into its messy, glorious, unbearable immediacy. Eat the peach and let the juice run down your chin. Feel the ache in your lower back after too long sitting. Notice how your heart pounds when you speak your truth. This is not a fall from grace, it is grace itself. The dark side of meditation was only ever trying to bring you here, to the irreducibly real, the unmistakably now. The final irony. And here lies the ultimate twist. The very practice that led you into the darkness becomes the anchor in it. The breath that once felt like a chore is now your lifeline. The silence you feared is now your sanctuary. The mind you tried to empty is now vast enough to hold it all. The joy, the terror, the unbearable beauty of being temporary. You realize with a shock that the dark night was not the absence of light, but light itself, so bright it blinded you until your eyes adjusted. Your turn. If this journey has resonated with you, then you are already awake enough to know, no one can give you the answers. But perhaps you no longer need them. Perhaps what you need is to turn toward your own experience with ruthless curiosity and bottomless compassion. The next time you sit to meditate and the darkness rises to meet you, try something radical, thank it. It is not your enemy, but the fiercest teacher you will ever have. The invitation stands. The path is open. All that remains is to walk it, not as the seeker you were, but as the human you are becoming.